ranked 12th in Engineering Service Examination of 2013. He is interested in power electronic application in power systems and power system dynamics. Now, I welcome Professor Aruna to begin the section. So please.
Thank you. Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this session will be regarding basic power electronic converters, which are used in smart grids. So this is the outline of the presentation. So I will give an introduction about basic power electronic converters and why we need power electronics at the first place. Then we will discuss different power electronic converter topologies, starting from a DC to DC converter, and within the DC to DC converter family, we will look into two types: non-isolated as well as isolated DC to DC converters. And from a DC to DC converter, we will see how to derive a DC to AC converter. Then some advanced topologies of DC to AC conversion, including multi-level converters, we will discuss. Then after that, we will deduce AC to DC converters and AC to AC converters. And we will conclude the session. So in a typical undergraduate curriculum, usually we start from AC to DC conversion. And later we go into DC to DC and DC to AC conversion, but it is more instructive to start from DC to DC conversion. If you understand DC to DC conversion clearly, the other power conversions can be easily derived from that. So let us go into the introductory part. So suppose we have a DC source and a DC load. So here a DC source is represented by an ideal voltage source, and its voltage rating is say Vi, and a DC load is represented by a pure resistance of magnitude RL, and the load demands a voltage of V0. This is a specified voltage rating of the load. In the simplest case, when Vi exactly matches Vo, when Vi is equal to Vo, there is no issue. You can directly connect Vi, the source, with the load using two wires, and the source will be delivering power to the load. But suppose Vi is not equal to Vo, then we need to devise some strategy to give the required load voltage using the given source. So the simplest method, so we will, there are two possibilities. Either Vi can be greater than Vo or Vi can be less than Vo. So first we will consider this case. When input voltage is greater than output voltage, what can be done? So suppose our input voltage is greater than output voltage, then the simplest solution is use a resistive divider. Resistive divider means you introduce an additional resistance Rs in series with the source. So this is a very simple circuit. If we add an additional resistance in series with the source, what will happen? Some amount of voltage will be dropped across Rs, and we can select Rs properly so that a desired voltage Vo will appear across. This Rs value can be properly selected. So this is the simplest solution possible when Vi is greater than Vo. So if we analyze this simple circuit, we can see that Vo output voltage will be, using the potential divider rule, output voltage will be Vi by Rs plus RL into RL, and from that you can get the value Rs. We know the value of load resistance, we know the value of input voltage, output voltage, so we can easily calculate the resistance value, and that can be connected here. But what is the problem with the circuit? So the first disadvantage is regarding the efficiency, because we are dissipating the power in a series element, which is a resistance. So efficiency is a problem. If you calculate the efficiency of this converter, you can see that it is also equal to the ratio of the voltage, output voltage by input voltage. So if the output voltage is very close to the input voltage value, efficiency may be high, may be fairly high when output is very close to the input voltage. But in most of the applications, output voltage will be very less compared to input voltage. One typical example is a data center. In a data center, the DC bus voltage is typically 48 volt. You have the DC bus at 48 volt, and your processor needs 1 volt power supply, or exactly 1.8 volt, or less than 2 volt. Very small voltage is required for the processor. So from 48 volt to 1 volt voltage conversion or power conversion, this if you use this if you adopt this particular strategy, the efficiency will come as 1 by 48 or 2%. So efficiency is very poor. So this strategy is not at all viable if the voltages are widely separated. We cannot use this. That is one major disadvantage of this solution. And there is another disadvantage due to poor efficiency. When efficiency is poor, your majority of the input power is dissipated as heat. So when there is more heat dissipated, we need to cool it effectively. So to provide cooling, we need a large heat sink. When the amount of heat energy generated is more, we need a large heat sink to dissipate the heat, and that demands more space. So that is another drawback of this solution. So you need large space, and poor efficiency is also poor. So people have modified this circuit, and they have realized the linear regulators. So in linear regulators, instead of directly using a series resistance, the same technique is used, but instead of using a resistance as such, this resistance is emulated using some solid state device. So this is used. This particular linear regulators are useful only when you are not concerned about efficiency. We are dealing with low power levels, and the losses efficiency is not a major problem. In that scenario, we can use this. We can use this idea of dropping the extra voltage across the series resistance. So here, instead of using a series resistance as such, we will emulate the series resistance using some solid state device. So if you are directly using a series resistance, and suppose a rheostat, if you are using a rheostat, it will be bulky, and you have to manually control that. So control is also not automatic. So in order to make it more controllable and compact, we will replace the series resistance by a solid state device. If you recollect the drain characteristics of a MOSFET, that is the characteristics between drain and drain to source voltage, drain current and drain to source voltage. For a given VGS value, the variation is something like this. So here you have a linear region. So suppose this is for VGS equal to some particular value, VGS1. Then for another value, VGS2, you have another curve. Then for different values, you can have different curves. So if you restrict your operation in this linear region or in ohmic region of the MOSFET, this MOSFET can emulate different resistance values by changing the gate source voltage. Okay, by changing the gate source voltage, a MOSFET can emulate a variable resistance. So that technique is used in linear regulators. So here you can see we have a source Vi, and we have a load here, and on the input side we have a capacitance to absorb the input voltage ripple, and on the output side we have another capacitance to absorb the output voltage ripple, and in between you have a series resistance. Here, instead of using a series resistance, a MOSFET is used, and we have to give impulses, gate signal to the MOSFET. So we have to sense the output voltage. In order to sense the output voltage, a potential divider arrangement is used as shown here. Then from that, a fraction of the output voltage is fed to the comparator, one terminal of the comparator, and a reference voltage is fed to the other end of the comparator. And the control circuitry can fire the MOSFET, and based on the control signal, the conductivity will change. If you drive the MOSFET deep into conduction, it will offer a low resistance, or you can reduce the conduction level of the MOSFET by changing the gate drive. So thereby you can change the regulate the voltage across the load. So this solution is useful only for low power applications where you are not concerned about efficiency, one typical example, 7805 IC. So using 7805, you can get 5 volt regulated output even when the input changes from say 7 volt to 25 volt. So the remaining voltage dropped across the series element. So the efficiency is not good in such an application, and the power rating of this IC is also limited. In high power applications, we cannot use this. So people have devised another topology using switching regulators. So in switching regulators, instead of using the solid state device in the linear region, we will use it as a switch. Either it will be fully turned on or it will be turned off, either on or off. So here a simple circuit is shown. So you have a source voltage and a load resistance, and a switch is connected in series, and this switch is fully controllable. A fully controllable switch like IGBT or MOSFET. So you can turn on and turn off that switch at your will, and by controlling the switch, we can control the power that is flowing into the load. So by operating the switch, by turning on and turning off the switch properly, we can control the power flow. So if the switch is turned on, the source voltage appears across the load. So output voltage will be high, equal to V source. When the switch is turned off, you have zero voltage coming on the load. So the output voltage is switching between a high and a low, zero value, V source and zero. So the load will see an average value. Load will see an average voltage VO, and we can show that average voltage is a function of the duty ratio. So T on by total time. So this average voltage can be controlled by properly controlling the on time of the switch. So this is a very good solution because there is no dissipating element here. The switch is either fully turned on or fully off. So there will be only conduction losses in the switch and switching losses. And this conduction losses and switching losses are comparatively small compared to the previous solution. So that led to the development of power electronic topologies, where you will operate a solid state device as a switch. So let us look into this circuit more deeply. So there is an inherent challenge in this circuit. So what is the challenge? We have assumed the load to be purely resistive, but in actual practice, the loads are usually inductive. Some amount of inductance will be present in the load. So when the load is inductive, there is a problem with this topology. So all of us know that the inductance has a property to oppose change in current. So if I load is the load current, then if this inductance is fairly large, then it will try to maintain a constant load current through the load. So we can use substitution theorem. If you know the current flowing through a particular branch in a network, you can substitute it by a current source. So using substitution theorem, we can replace this network by this one on the right side. So this RL load is replaced by a current source since we know the current flowing through the branch. Now if you look into this circuit, there is a problem in here because when you are closing the switch, there is no issue. The source this voltage source and current source forms a loop. But when you are opening the switch, there is an issue. A current source can be short circuited, but it cannot be open circuited. You cannot open out a current source because when you open out a current source, large indefinite voltages will appear across the terminals of the current source. So that is an issue here. We cannot open this switch safely. So what is the solution? So if your load is inductive, we cannot open this switch like this. If you are opening out this switch, some other path has to be provided for the current to continue to flow. So one simple solution is provide another switch across the load, this current source. Provide one more switch across the current source, and at the moment when you are opening this switch S1, close the switch S2. So when you are opening S1, immediately close S2 so that this load current can circulate in this path. So we will not break the path of this current source. We will not open out the current source. So that is one possible solution. So now we have two switches. We have a voltage source, a current sink, that is this current source is representing our load consuming constant current. Then there are two switches, S1 and S2. They are complementary in operation. When S1 is closed, S2 will be open. When S1 is open, S2 will be closed. Okay, so now how to realize S1 and S2? We cannot use mechanical switches because they are very slow. So some solid state device has to be used, and how to select the switches, let us see. So we have two situations. When S1 is on, the situation will be something like this. S1 is on, you have S2 open, and this is the load current. Okay, so if you observe this, S2, the source voltage is directly appearing across S2. The source voltage, whatever be the source voltage Vi, that will directly appear across the open circuited switch S2. So S2 must be capable of blocking this voltage Vi with this polarity. So S2 must be capable of blocking this voltage Vi. And S1 at the same time, S1 must be capable of conducting current in this direction. So S1 must be capable of conducting current in left to right direction. S2 must be capable of blocking voltage with this polarity. And when this is during on condition, then during off condition of S1, here S1 on and S2 off, during S1 off and S2 on, what is the scenario? When S1 is off, this path is open, here S2 is closed. And now you can see that positive end of the battery is coming to one end of S1, negative terminal of the battery is coming to other end of S1. So S1 has to block voltage with this particular polarity, whereas S2 has to conduct current in this direction. So S2 has to conduct current in the upward direction. Because this current source is pointing downwards, S2 has to conduct current in this direction. So these are the requirements. So we can realize this using a MOSFET and a diode. Suppose S1 is a IGBT or MOSFET. You can use any one of that. We have to conduct current from left to right direction. So with the IGBT has to be oriented like this. And this IGBT can block voltages with this polarity. And IGBT during off condition can block voltage with the collector terminal positive and the emitter terminal negative. So S1 can be realized using an IGBT. And if you look at S2, S2 has to block voltage with the plus minus like this, and S2 has to conduct current in the upward direction. So if you use a diode like this, diode can conduct current in the upward direction, and diode can block voltages with the cathode positive and anode negative reverse voltage. So that will satisfy these requirements. So if I have replaced this S1 by an IGBT and S2 by a diode, so the circuit looks like this. Now this current source signifies the fact that the current flowing through this branch is constant. So it can be equivalent to current flowing through an inductance. So current flowing through an inductance is usually a constant value because inductance tries to keep that current constant, tries to oppose the changes in current. And if we connect the output, these two terminals to a load section consists of a filter and a load, that is a capacitance, filter and a load. This circuit will be familiar to all of us. This is a standard buck converter. So this is how we derive a buck converter from the fundamentals. So in a buck converter, we can have a switch S1 and a diode D1, and there is an inductance L1, and you have a capacitance filter and a resistive load. So in this buck converter, we can get the desired voltage at the output. We need to get an input-output relationship, a relationship between VI and VO, and that can be deduced using a principle known as volt-second balance. So if VL is the voltage across the inductance, it is equal to L into di by dt. and the average value of this inductance voltage will be equal to average of L into di by dt, and average value of di by dt has to be 0, because if average rate of change of di by dt is non-zero, if it is positive, if the average value of di by dt is positive, then your inductance current will build up. If average value of di by dt is less than 0, then inductance current will go down. But we need a periodic variation in the current. So the average rate of change must be 0, and di by dt average has to be 0. So that implies average voltage across the inductance has to be 0. So average voltage across the inductance must be 0 over a cycle, and that principle is known as volt-second balance. And using volt-second balance, we can derive the voltage input-output relationship, and for a buck converter, that is VO average. Average value of output voltage is equal to input voltage into duty cycle. So this can be derived. So by controlling the duty cycle is just T on by T total time. So by controlling the duty ratio, we can get desired value of output voltage. So that is the working of a buck converter. Then that is how we derive a buck converter. I am not going into the details of the working. We are trying to reduce different topologies from fundamentals. Now let us try to reduce a boost converter from this circuit. So here we have considered only buck operation, that is input voltage is greater than output voltage. Now if you want a boost operation, what we can do is we can interchange the roads. Here this side is source and this side is sink. Suppose we make this side source, we make the right side source, and power is absorbed here. That can be done by interchanging the direction of this, by changing the direction of this current source. So if you reverse the current source, it will inject current into this port. So it is delivering power. And let us now realize S1 and S2 in this particular circuit. So here, if you apply the previous principle, what I have shown in the previous slide, whether S1 blocks positive voltage, if you apply that, you can see S1 will be a diode and S2 can be emulated using a IGBT connector like this. Because current S1 has current conduction capability in this direction. This diode is capable of conducting in this direction, and this diode can block voltages with this polarity, left side plus and right side minus. Whereas this S2 can conduct current in this direction. It is capable of conducting current from collector to emitter, and at the same time it is capable of blocking voltages with upper and positive and lower and negative like this. So in this network, this current source can be replaced by a voltage source in series with a large value of inductance. So when you connect a large inductance in series with a voltage source, the current in this path will be fairly constant. So this current source can be replaced by this voltage source in series with an inductance. And in order to absorb power here, we can replace this source by a load section. A load section consists of a capacitor in parallel with a load resistance. So if you replace that, the circuit will look like this. And if you observe the circuit from left to right, this is a boost converter. In the boost converter, you have a voltage source in series with an inductance and a switch, a diode, and the output source. So I will flip this circuit and I will redraw it in the next page. So if you flip the circuit from left to right, you will get this. So this is the boost converter circuit. You have a voltage source on the left hand, and there is an inductance, and you have a switch S1, and there is a diode, and you have an output section consisting of a load resistance and a filter. Okay. So when the switch is turned on, this inductance will charge. This inductance will store energy, and at that time this diode will be off, and this capacitance will be delivering power to the load. And when the switch is off, when the switch is turned off, this diode will turn on, and the stored energy in the inductance will be given to the load. And if you apply volt-second balance in this boost converter circuit, you can show that output voltage will be equal to input voltage by 1 minus D. So we will get boost operation. That is, Vi by 1 minus D is always greater than Vi. So this is the voltage across the inductance when switch is on and off. These are the voltage. When switch is on, this path is directly closed. So whatever be the input voltage, that will appear across the switch. When the switch is off, when you have the switch off, the diode will be conducting. And voltage across the inductance will be input voltage minus output voltage. This voltage is output voltage. So here, then we can apply volt-second balance, and we can show that V in by 1 minus D is the input-output relationship. Now, if we look into the buck and boost topologies closely, actually this combination of two devices, that is, here you can see an IGBT and a diode connected to this particular terminal. Here also you can see an IGBT and diode connected to this terminal. These can be shown by a single pole double throw switch. This single pole, this is the pole, and this is throw T1, this is throw T2. So this single pole double throw switch can replace this switch S1 and S2. Here also, this IGBT and MOS diode can be replaced by a single pole double throw switch. So one more topology can be deduced from here if you interchange the position of this switch and the throws. So in the next topology, we will connect the throws to the two terminals, input and output terminals, and the pole will be grounded through the inductance. So here we have grounded the pole through the inductance, and the two throws T1 and T2 are connected to the input and output terminals. And in this circuit, when pole P is connected to throw T1, your input voltage will directly appear across the inductance. So inductance voltage across the inductance VL will be input voltage when pole P is connected to throw T1, and inductance voltage will be equal to output voltage the moment you throw this to T2. So when T2 is connected, inductance voltage across the inductance will be same as output voltage. So now if you apply volt-second balance, you will get this relation, and if you simplify that relation, you can see that output voltage will be equal to input voltage into D by 1 minus D with a negative sign. So when this number appears here, D by 1 minus D, this can take values. This can either be buck or boost operation. This VO is equal to V into D by 1 minus D. This number can be greater than 1 or less than 1. So you can have both boost and buck operation in the same converter if you change the position of the pole and throws. So this was our pole, and this is throw T1 and T2. If you replace it with the IGBT and diode, it will appear like this. So this particular circuit is known as buck boost converter. So in buck boost converter, we have an output voltage which is negative of input voltage into D by 1 minus D. And by properly selecting the value of D, we can have either buck operation or boost operation. So we have seen 3 DC to DC converters. In all these 3 DC to DC converters, the inputs ground and the output ground are same. So if you look into the converters, you can see the negative rail is common for both input as well as output. There is no galvanic isolation. So this forms non-isolated family of converters. There are two more converters in this, two more popular converters known as Chuk converter and Sepik converter. So let us see how a Chuk converter can be deduced from the fundamentals. A Chuk converter combines the good characteristics of buck and boost converters, and it can either step up or step down. It is a buck boost type. It can step up or step down both voltage and current. So if you have a buck in the buck converter, if you recollect the circuit of a buck converter, you have switch in series with the input and inductance in series with your output section. So since inductance is in series with the output section, the output current will be continuous. So there is a smooth output current for a buck converter. Since there is a switch in series with the input side, input current will be pulsating. Whereas in a boost converter, if you look into the circuit diagram of a boost converter, you have an inductance in series with the input side. Then you have a switch and diode. So since the inductance is in series with the input side, the input current will be smooth, whereas the output current, there will be ripples. So when the output current has ripples, you need a large capacitance. That is one disadvantage. Then if we combine the good characteristics, that is smooth output current of buck converter and smooth input current of boost converter. So in order to combine these two, we can cascade a boost and a buck converter. And if you cascade a boost and buck converter, it will reduce a chip converter. This chip converter was proposed by Professor Chuk of Caltech. That's why this particular name. So let us see the diagram. So this is the circuit diagram of a chip converter. So here you have two inductors and two capacitors. So one important feature of a chip converter is there will be a coupling capacitor which transfers energy from the input to the output side. And there are two inductors, L1 and L2. And we will see how this particular arrangement is related to cascaded connection of simple boost and buck. So let us consider the similarity with the cascaded boost and buck. Here I have drawn a boost converter here. So this part forms a boost converter. You have a voltage source in series with an inductance, then switch, diode and capacitor. Then so this forms a boost converter, and this part forms a buck converter. Here we have a switch, diode and inductance. Now if we operate these two switches S1 and S2 simultaneously, suppose we operate these two switches S1 and S2 identically. If we give firing pulses to them identically, let us draw the diagrams during on and off conditions. So when during on condition, when S1 and S2 are on, if you draw the diagram of the cascaded combination, you will get the figure on the top left corner. This is the condition of this cascaded converter during switch on. That is, when this particular switch is on, this inductance, this terminal will be directly grounded, and when this is closed, at the same time these two diodes will be open. Okay. So this particular circuit I have shown in the next diagram here. And similarly, when the switches are off and the diodes are conducting, you will get this particular diagram. And in the chip converter, if you do the same thing, if you draw the diagrams for the switch on and switch off terminals conditions, you can see that the two diagrams are exactly similar. During on condition, in a cascaded boost buck converter and a chip converter, you have the same operation. You can see here. On the input side, you have an inductance in series with a voltage source. Here also you have an inductance in series with a voltage source. And on the output side, you have this particular loop. Here also you have same loop. So this is exactly similar. Whereas in the off condition also, you have same topology coming here. Okay. Same thing is coming. So actually, chip converter is same as a cascaded combination of buck boost converter with the identical firing given to S1 and S2. And the input-output relation of the chip converter can be easily derived from the cascaded combination of boost and buck. So initially we have a boost converter here, and on the output of, if this is input voltage V in and this voltage is Vc, then Vc is the output of the boost converter, that will be equal to V in by 1 minus D. This relation we have already seen. And this is fed to a buck stage. So in the buck stage, output will be duty cycle times the input voltage. So input voltage to the buck stage is Vc. So D into Vc. So we will get D by 1 minus D into V. So whenever D by 1 minus D comes, we have both buck and boost capabilities. Output voltage can be greater than input or less than input. So essentially, chip converter is a cascaded combination of buck and boost converter with the identical firing given to both the switches. So let us see how to easily remember this diagram. If you first you draw a boost converter, first we will draw a boost converter. Then after that we can draw a buck converter. Converter is this. Then this is our output. Then this part of the circuit, that is this combination of diode, switch and capacitance, can be simply replaced by a coupling capacitor. You simply replace this section by a coupling capacitor. So I will draw one more figure. Simply replace that section by a coupling capacitor and flip this section. If you flip this section, you will get diode here, inductance here, this is capacitance. And you can connect the inductance in the negative rail or the positive rail, there is no change. So we can connect the inductance in the positive rail. So instead of connecting it in the negative rail, just connect it in the positive rail. So you will get the chip converter. So this is the chip converter topology. So first you draw a boost converter, then a buck converter, and eliminate this combination of diode, capacitance and switch by a simple coupling capacitor and flip the diode. Just flip the diode. Then we will get the chip. Now similarly, in the SEPIC converter, it is actually a cascaded combination of boost and buck boost. So first we will draw a boost converter. So boost converter will be like this. And this load will be coming at the output side. Then follow it with a buck boost topology. So in the buck boost topology, we have switch, inductance, and a diode like this. This is the buck boost converter. And here also apply the same logic. This combination of diode, switch, and coupling capacitor can be replaced by a simple coupling capacitor, and just flip the diode. So, flip the diode. So this topology leads to something known as SEPIC converter. Then there are many other converters which can be deduced from the fundamental converters. Okay. So these are the non-isolated converters. Now we will see isolated converters. So in isolated converters, the source and the load will have different ground. The negative rail of the source is not connected to the negative rail of the load. They have separate grounds. So one or two popular isolated converters are flyback converter and forward converter. So let us see how a flyback converter can be deduced from the basic converter. So flyback converter is actually deduced from a buck boost converter. It is a buck boost derived topology. So I have drawn a buck boost converter. So in a buck boost converter, you have switch on the input side. There's an inductance here and a diode. This is the buck boost topology. In this particular topology, you can observe this switch is coming on the positive rail. So I can connect the switch in the negative rail also without affecting the circuit, without any change, because this is simply a switch. Okay, this is a simple switch, and one can connect the switch in this rail or on the negative rail. There is no change. So I will short these two ends and I will connect the switch in the other rail, that is here. But you have to keep in mind the direction of current flow. So if you observe the previous diagram, current was flowing through the positive rail in this direction and current is coming through the negative rail in this direction. So we have to orient our IGBT like this. Current has to flow this way. So I have just connected my IGBT here. Or I have shifted it to the lower rail. Now let me assume that this is my reference node in the circuit. This point is my reference node. So without explicitly showing this potential V in here, what I can do is I can delete this source. I can just mark a bubble here and mark it as V in. Okay. Instead of, since this is our reference node, I can delete this source and I can simply put a bubble here and mark it as V in. So it means the same thing. This point is at a potential of V in with respect to the ground. So that that is shown here. Now I can orient this switch. Okay, so I have replaced the source here. Now I will reorient the switch in the vertical position. So now in this diagram I have shown the switch in the vertical position and this V in also I have shown in the vertical position. So we have arrived at this particular converter. So this is same as our buck boost. We have not changed anything. We started from buck boost converter. We just changed the location of the switch from positive rail to the negative rail and reoriented the switch in the vertical direction and marked V in like this. That is the only thing we have done. Now we can replace this single inductance by a transformer. So thereby we can bring isolation. So here I have changed that inductance by a transformer. So this particular arrangement forms a flyback converter. So here if you observe this, output current will be, since the diode is oriented like this, current will be flowing this way or in the upward direction. So the output voltage will be of this polarity. Output voltage will have this polarity. So if you want output voltage upper terminal positive and lower terminal negative, what we can do is we can flip the output side. We can change the dot polarity to the other end. We can change the diode direction. Okay. So here you have output voltage with the lower and positive and upper and negative. So in order to make the upper end positive and lower end negative, what I have done is I have changed the location of the nodes and I have changed the direction of the diode. So this is the final diagram of flyback converter. So what happens in a flyback converter? In a flyback converter, when the switch is on, this inductance will store energy in the core. This current will be flowing through this inductance and it will store energy in the core. And when the moment you open this switch, the energy stored in the core will be delivered to the output through this diode. Diode will turn on. Why the diode turns on? Let us see. Because initially, when the switch is on, this terminal will be positive and this will be negative, and this dotted end will be positive and this non-dot end will be negative. And the moment you switch off this IGBT, immediately the polarity of this primary inductance will change and it will become minus here and plus in the bottom. Similarly, this polarity will also change. So when this upper end becomes positive, it will drive this diode into conduction and the power will flow into the load. So if you do the volt-second analysis for this flyback converter, we can apply volt-second balance to the input side inductance. And if you consider the input side inductance, when the switch is on, the full V in voltage is appearing across the switch. So VL1 is equal to V in when the switch is on. And this, when the switch is off, whatever be the output voltage, that suppose the output voltage is VO with this polarity, then if the turns ratio of this transformer is 1:n, then the voltage appearing on the input side will be VO by N. And since the dot polarities are like this, there will be a negative sign. So it is minus VO by N. And if you apply volt-second balance, you will get this input-output relationship. Output voltage will be equal to D by 1 minus D into V in with the multiplication by turns ratio. So relationship is same as that of a buck boost converter, but there is no negative sign here. and there is an additional control variable n. So by adjusting the value of n, we can increase the gain of the flyback converter. That is the main attraction of flyback converter. By adjusting this turns ratio, we can achieve a wide range of gain. So it is very popularly used in mobile chargers and many electronic circuits where you need an isolation between the source and the load. And this is a very simple converter also. You need only a transformer and a diode and capacitance. And since this is switching at high frequency, the size of this transformer will not be a problem. It will be usually of compact size. And there is an important question here. If you observe this circuit closely, you can see that the primary inductance is connected in series with the switch. So we always say that we cannot break the current in an inductance. We cannot open circuit a path containing an inductance, because current has to be maintained in an inductive path. But here we have said that we will open and close the switch by giving firing pulses to this IGBT. Okay, so the moment you open the switch, this circuit gets open circuited. So current in that winding gets interrupted. So can we interrupt the winding in a current? That is another question. So here we can understand the difference between a coupled inductor and a transformer. So what is shown here in a flyback converter is actually not a transformer in the usual sense. It is a coupled inductor. So there is a big difference between a coupled inductor and a transformer. So here I have shown a coupled inductance. You have a core and two inductance, two windings L1 and L2, inductance values L1 and L2. So this is different from transformer. So the basic difference is, in the case of a transformer, whenever you have a load connected, it will draw some current I2, and at the same time you have a current flow in the input side I1. Okay. If it is open circuited, I2 is 0, I1 is also 0. If you are neglecting the no load current, magnetizing current. So practically, whenever there is a current flowing into one winding in a transformer, always there will be a current flowing out from the other winding. So whereas in an coupled inductor, that is not the case. Here in transformer, we are not storing any energy in the core. No energy is stored in the core. Whatever energy is coming into the input port or in the primary, it is immediately delivered to the load. There is no storage of energy in the core. Whereas in a coupled inductance, suppose we give supply to inductance L1, then current is flowing into inductance L1, then magnetic field will build up and half Li square energy is stored in this core. Okay. Then at that time L2 may be open, there is no issue. Then you can open circuit L1 and you can connect a load to L2. Then what happens? Whatever be the energy stored in L2 in the core will be delivered to the load using L2 by a current flowing into L2. So I will clarify it using this diagram. Suppose we have this particular arrangement. This is a coupled inductor with this particular dot polarity, and there are two switches, S1 on the primary and S2 on the secondary, and we have two sources like this. So suppose we close the switch S1 for some duration of time, and we will switch off and immediately switch on S2 after that, like I have shown here in the right side. Then let us see what happens when S1 is closed. When S1 is closed, some current will be flowing into L1, so magnetic field will build up, so energy can be stored in the core, and at that time S2 is open and nothing is happening in the second winding. The moment you open switch S1, what has to be done? The moment you open the switch S1, you have to close switch S2, because we have to maintain what is known as flux continuity. So there is due to the flow of current in L1, some magnetic field is set up and you have flux in the core, and you cannot immediately make the flux 0, because by Faraday's law, E is equal to N into d phi by dt, and if there is a discontinuity in flux, you have impulse voltage. So we cannot have impulse voltages in a circuit like this. So we cannot afford for discontinuity in flux. So initially there is a current flow in L1 and magnetic field is building up. So the moment you open switch S1, you can provide a path for current to flow in the other winding so that same flux is maintained in the core. So it will satisfy flux continuity. So when S1 is open, simultaneously S2 is closed. So current will flow in the second winding and the magnetic field in the core will be maintained and we will get flux continuity. So if you look into the flyback converter, same thing is happening here. Initially some current is flowing into this winding, one primary winding. So magnetic field is building up. There is some flux in some energy stored in the core. There is some flux level, and the moment you break this switch, open this switch, this diode will be immediately forward biased. So there will be a path for the second winding to release energy into the load. So when current flows through the second winding, there will be magnetic field in the core, because when I2 flows through this, say N2, you have N2 I2 or some MMF and related magnetic field in the core. So it will maintain flux continuity. So there is no issue of breaking an inductive circuit. So that is about flyback converter. Now we can derive another converter known as forward converter, which is another famous isolated converter topology that is derived from buck converter. So let us start from a buck converter circuit. So I have shown a buck converter here. So this is, you have a voltage source, switch in series with a voltage source, then diode, inductance, and the output section. So that is a standard buck converter. So same thing we will do. We will change the switch from the positive rail to the negative rail. So I have changed the switch from positive rail to negative rail here. Okay. Now I have reoriented the switch like this. In the previous figure, the switch was in the horizontal position. I have just made it vertical in the next diagram. So if you rearrange it like this, then in the next diagram we can eliminate the source and we can mark it as V. So let us eliminate this source and mark this point as ground and simply put a bubble here and write V. So it means the same thing. This this point set a potential of V with respect to ground. So that circuit is redrawn here. So this is same as our buck converter. Then here slightly push this diode into the right side. So I have pushed this diode into the right side. So some space is now available here. So here we can introduce a transformer. So let us introduce a transformer here, like this. So this, there will be a if we can introduce a transformer and galvanic isolation here. Now we have to analyze the circuit whether flux continuity is maintained. We have to check whether flux continuity is maintained in the circuit, or is there any problem with the circuit. So when S is on, suppose this switch is on, what happens? When switch is on, this current flows through the primary winding. So magnetic field is building up, some current is flowing in the primary winding, energy is stored in the core. The moment you open the switch, the polarity of this inductance voltage will reverse. So this minus sign, this dot end will become negative and this non-dot end will become positive. So this plus minus will forward bias this diode. Okay, this voltage will forward bias this diode and this diode will conduct. So when this diode conducts, you have a short circuit across the second winding. So when you have a short circuit across the second winding, this voltage is forced to zero. This voltage is forced to zero. So that will violate our flux continuity. So in order to avoid that, they have introduced a diode in series with the second winding. So by introducing a diode in series with the secondary winding, we can avoid this situation. The moment you open the switch S, this terminal will become, the lower terminal will become positive and upper terminal will become negative. But due to the presence of this diode, now the path will be open. This path will be open, and this circuit will not close, and this voltage is not forced to zero. So still there is no path for the current to flow. We have avoided short circuiting this winding, but still there is no current path for the current to flow and reset the flux. So in order to reset the flux in the core, we have to introduce one more winding. So one more winding is introduced in the core. In the core, where we have counted the primary and secondary windings, one more winding and a diode is introduced. Now let us analyze the operation. So initially, when the switch is closed, you have current flowing through the primary winding and energy is stored in the core, and at the same time there is no current flow through this tertiary winding or this reset winding. This is a reset winding. Because of the presence of this diode, we cannot have a current flow through this path initially. The moment you open the switch, what happens? The moment you open the switch, the voltage across this inductance will reverse. This end will become negative and bottom end will become positive. So this dot end is now negative. So this dot end becomes negative and this non-dot end becomes positive. So that will forward bias this diode and this path will be now live. It will conduct. So current can flow through this reset winding. So flux continuity is maintained. So this particular topology, which is slightly complex compared to the flyback converter, this is known as forward converter. Okay, there are different arrangements to reset this flux in the core. This is one such arrangement. There can be another solution using a diode and a resistance like this. Instead of using an inductance, if you want to avoid using an inductance, coupled inductor, we can use something like this. So this is our circuit. So here on the primary side, we will provide one more diode and a resistance. This is another solution. So in the normal condition, when switch is when switch is on, due to the presence of this diode, no current will be flowing in this path, in this reset path. But the moment you turn off the switch, this diode will turn on and the flux can reset. Flux in the core can reset by sending current to this path. So that topology is also there. There are a lot of modified topologies. Many IEEE papers are there with modified topologies for this forward converter. Okay, so in isolated converters are usually used when safety requirements impose restrictions. There are some safety requirements like you need to provide diagonal isolation between input and output imposed by the authority. In such situations, isolated converters can be used. And another advantage of isolated converter is you have separate grounds. When for one section of the input you have one ground and another section of the circuit you have another ground. So these grounds are not the same. So there we have break this this ground loop is now broken. There's no ground loop. So there will not be any current flowing through the parasitic elements and electromagnetic interference will be less. So that is another advantage of isolated converters. So we have seen DC to DC conversions. Now let us go into DC to AC conversion. How we can reduce DC to AC conversion from the simple circuit that we have started with. So this is the first circuit I have drawn. So let us deduce a DC to AC conversion from this. So in an AC, on the AC side, you have a bidirectional current and bidirectional voltage. Your voltage will be either plus or positive or negative, and the current flow can also be in one direction or the opposite direction. So first we will introduce bidirectional current capability into the circuit. So this is the first circuit we have seen, S1 and S2, with two switches and one voltage source and one current source. So here we have replaced S1 by IGBT and S2 by a diode, as we discussed in the beginning. And in this this circuit I have reoriented like this. I have drawn the switch in the upper position and diode here, and this is the initial circuit we have shown in drawn in a different way. It is the same circuit. So remember this one. Then we have seen a boost converter like this, by using S1 and by selecting S1 and S2 differently, and by reversing the direction of the current source, we have drawn one more circuit in the beginning for the reducing boost converter. And if you reorient that boost converter, you will get this particular topology. And now if I combine these two, diagrams, so this is my first circuit where I have a switch in series with a voltage source, a diode here, and a current source pointing downwards. And in the second circuit, I have a diode in the upper position, switch in the lower position, and current source is pointing upwards. And now if I combine these two circuits, I will get what is shown below. This transistor is capable of carrying current in the downward direction, whereas this diode is capable of carrying current in the upward direction. So if you combine them, you will get a bidirectional switch like this. And similarly here, this diode is capable of carrying current in the upward direction. This transistor is capable of carrying current in the downward direction. If you combine them, you will get something like this. And now if you closely observe, this current source is merged with this current source. So here direction of current flow is downwards, here direction of current flow is upwards. So now you have bidirectional current in the load. So we have realized what is known as a half bridge converter. So this circuit is popularly known as half bridge converter. So in a half bridge converter, you have a DC link on one side, and on the load side you can have bidirectional current. But voltage is positive, because what is the voltage of point A with respect to ground, with respect to this terminal O? So there are two possible values. When switch S1 is on, we have two switches like this, S1 and S2, and we have load like this. So when the moment you close S1, when S1 is on, this point A is same as the upper point here. So VAO will be equal to VDC. So it will be equal to VDC. The moment you close switch S2 and open switch S1, this point will be shorted to ground. So this will become 0. So the output of half bridge converter oscillates between these two levels. You have two levels in the output, VDC and 0, based on whether S1 is on or S2 is on. So when S1 is on, S2 will be off. When S2 is on, S1 will be off. They are complementary. And this will realize a half bridge converter. And what is the use of this in a smart grid? This can be used for interfacing a battery to our DC microgrid. So suppose this is our DC bus in the DC microgrid, and you can connect a battery on the load side. Previously, I had a resistive load here and a series with an inductance. Previously, I had a resistive load. Now, I have replaced this resistive load by a battery. And by the nature of this power electronic circuit, it can have bidirectional current carrying capability on the load side, and we require that for a battery. Battery can either charge, and current is flowing in this direction, or it can discharge and current is flowing in this direction. So to interface a battery to a DC microgrid, this half bridge converter can be used. So this is the battery charging mode or buck mode. Why it is called a buck mode will be clear if you look into this diagram. During buck mode, when battery is charging, this S1 will be conducting. So this is the path. And when S1 is off, this S1 will be operating. When S1 is conducting, this inductance will charge. And when S1 is turned off, this can freewheel through. This can freewheel through this diagram. So this is same as a buck converter. If you look here, this switch, diode, inductance combination like this. So it is a buck converter. So it is a buck mode. Similarly, when battery is discharging, S2 will be operating. We will turn on and turn off S2 using PWM. So this is actually boost operation. Looking from the battery side, if you look from the battery side, you have battery can be modeled as a voltage source. Then you have an inductance. Then you have a switch here. Then there is a diode here. See this. So if you look from left to right, you are having a boost operation, boost converter. So this is known as boost mode, battery discharging into the DC. So that is one application. Then if you combine, if you want a bidirectional voltage capability on the load, if you want AC voltage on the load, here we got only bidirectional current flow on the load side. Voltage is still either VDC or zero. Still it is positive voltage. Suppose we want both positive as well as negative voltage on the load side. So alternating voltage on the load side. We can introduce two more switches and that forms a full bridge converter. Previously it was a half bridge. Now it is a full bridge converter. So in a full bridge converter we have four switches. So by appropriately turning on and turning off the four switches, you can have bidirectional current on the AB section. So the voltage will be either VDC or minus VDC based on where S1 and S2. When S1 and S2 are on, when you have these two switches on, S1 and S2 on, A is connected to upper terminal of VDC, B is connected to the upper terminal of VDC, you will have positive VDC on the load. And if the complementary pair is turned on, S3 and S4 are turned on, you will have minus VDC on the load. So we will get a square voltage across the square waveform, across the alternating voltage across the. And if the load is highly inductive, it will see we will see what is the shape of the current. When you analyzing this, if you write the Fourier series of this expression in this waveform, there will be all odd harmonics will be present. The magnitude is 4 VDC by n pi sin n omega naught t. N varies from 1, 3, 5, 7, etc. So all odd harmonics are present, and if the load has a filtering action, if it is a motor load, then it will see a sinusoidal current if it will suppress a higher order harmonics. Otherwise, we have to design filters. That is one option. But if you are designing filters to remove these harmonics, what is the problem? We have all the odd harmonics. Fundamental is 4 VDC by pi. Third harmonics is 4 VDC by 3 pi. The harmonics there. So all the prominent harmonics are present. And if we are designing filters for eliminating these harmonics, suppressing these harmonics, the size of the filter will be very large. It will be bulky. So in order to avoid that, what one solution is shift these harmonics to higher orders. Instead of 3, 5, shift these harmonics by some mechanism, shift these harmonics to higher orders. Like say, instead of 3 and 5, say shift it to 21 or 25. Like that. So those higher order harmonics can be easily eliminated using a low pass filter. So in order to introduce that, shift the harmonics to higher orders, we need PWM, pulse width modulation. So in pulse width modulation, what we will be doing? We will have a control signal. Control signal is a sinusoidal voltage waveform, and we will have a carrier. Carrier is a high frequency triangular waveform. So by comparing this control signal with the carrier signal, we can generate gate pulses, and that is used to drive these switches. So the advantage of using that pulse width modulation is harmonics will be shifted to the higher orders, and those higher order harmonics can be eliminated using a low cost, low size filter. And if we add one more leg to the above converter, we can have a 3-phase output, ABC or RYB. So DC to 3-phase AC conversion is possible. So this is a 3-phase voltage source inverter. This is known as a VSI, voltage source inverter. Here we have a DC source, and it is feeding power to an RL load, 3-phase RL load. So if we properly use pulse width modulation, either sinusoidal PWM or space vector PWM, we can have fundamental currents flowing in these loads and the higher order harmonics suppressed very minimum. And this VSIs in a smart grid or in a microgrid can operate in two modes. They can be either in islanded mode or in a grid connected mode. So when you have a VSI in islanded mode, you will be controlling its voltage and frequency because there is no other generator present. Our voltage source inverter has to fix the voltage and frequency levels in the grid. So we have to control V and F. V and F are the control variables. Whereas when we integrate a VSI to a grid, in a grid connected mode, grid decides the voltage and frequency values. We can inject active and reactive powers into the grid, or we can absorb active and reactive power from the grid. So in that case, we are controlling P and Q variables. So VSIs have two types of controls, either VF control or PQ control, based on whether they are islanded or grid connected. And in islanded mode, this is the topology. The voltage source inverter has a DC link here, and this DC link may be the output of a PV panel. So maybe we have a PV panel, and this PV panel is feeding a boost converter, and the output of the boost converter is fed to this voltage source inverter, and this part forms a filter. So there will be an LC filter, and in some cases there will be an LCL filter. So there will be a filter to suppress the harmonics. Then this part forms a feeder, and this after the feeder there will be loop. So this is the topology in islanded mode. And in islanded mode, we will be controlling this bus voltage at this point, this capacitance voltage, and the inductance current. These are the two state variables that we will be controlling: current flowing through this filter inductance IL, and voltage across this capacitance, say EC. So these two variables we will be controlling. So there will be an inner current loop and an outer voltage loop. And those controls are usually done in DQ reference frame, and that is known as classical vector current control. And if you have two such inverters operating in parallel, there is an issue of power sharing. So active research is going on in that area also. When we have two VSIs feeding power to a common load through two feeders. So this is our VSI1, this is VSI2. We have two feeders feeding a common load. And if this VSI is at a longer distance, then this feeder impedance will be higher. Suppose this is Z1, and this VSI2 is closer to the load, then this will be Z2. So when the feeder impedances are different, the reactive power that is shared by VSI1 and VSI2 will be, there will be huge difference between the reactive powers. So reactive power sharing in an islanded microgrid is a problem. It's a challenging problem. So there are many papers available in that area. When in grid connected mode, so again we will be sensing this inductor current. We are not controlling actually, we are sensing this inductance voltage and the inductance current and the capacitance voltage, and we will be controlling the amount of active power which is injected into the grid and the amount of reactive power injected into the grid. So that will be controlled in the grid connected. Voltage and frequency are decided by the grid. So here something known as a phase locked loop is popularly used to give the reference frame angle for doing the transformations. If we are doing a control in DQ reference frame, we need to transform the ABC variables into DQ. So for doing that DQ to ABC transformation, we need a phase angle theta. So this angle theta is generated, it should be in synchronism with the grid, so that will be extracted from the grid using a PL. And there is such topic in this one research problem is this PLL dynamics in PLL gains will interact with the controller gains. There will be inner current controller and outer voltage loop control for this VSI. So usually there may be an interaction between the PLL and the inner current control loop when this grid is weak. In a weak grid. Weak grid means the short circuit ratio of the grid is very small, close to less than 3. Maybe SCR is equal to 1 means very weak grid. So in a weak grid, you don't have stable voltages and currents at that point of common coupling. And in such a scenario, the interaction between the PLL and this inner current control loop in the VSI may make the system unstable. So that is another research problem. The people have tried to avoid the use of this PLL and use some direct power control technique and other control techniques where PLL can be avoided, or modified PLLs are proposed. Now let us look into current source inverters. So current source inverters can be reduced from voltage source inverters by making some changes. So I have drawn a full bridge voltage source, single phase full bridge voltage source inverter here. So let us redraw this using like this. So here, when this upper switch is on, your pole A is connected to the upper throw. When this lower switch is on, this pole A will be connected to the lower throw. So you can replace these two IGBTs by this single pole double throw switch like this. Similarly, at this end B, we can replace the two IGBTs by by a single pole double throw switch, SPDT switch like this. So when A is connected to the upper end and B is connected to the lower terminal, AB will receive plus VDC voltage. And when A is connected to lower end and B is connected to upper end, it will receive minus VDC. So same circuit is drawn in a different way. So now let us interchange the positions of the source and the load. Here source is at this location and load is between A and B. Now let us interchange the locations. So if you interchange the locations, load will come at this side. So previously source was here, now I have placed load at that point, and this load is replaced by a current source. Why a current source? Because this side we are assuming we are interchanging DC link. Previously this side was DC and this side was AC. Now we are interchanging the positions. So on this side you have unidirectional. You should have unidirectional current. So that is indicated by a current source in the between the nodes A and B. So we have interchanged the positions and like this. And load can be a stiff voltage load. Load demands a stiff voltage. So in that case, in order to show that load demands a stiff voltage, we can put a capacitance in this. So load voltage will be practically constant if this capacitance value is sufficiently large. So now we have bidirectional current in this end and we have unidirectional current here. So here we need an AC capacitor because this is now our AC side. We have interchanged the positions of source and sink. So this side, left side becomes now AC side. So here you have bidirectional current. Here you have unidirectional. Now, how to realize these four switching actions? So let us analyze that. So when the point A is connected to the upper throw and point B is connected to the lower throw, current will be flowing this way. Current will be flowing this way, like this. So in that scenario, we understood that direction of current flow is like this in this switch, in the closed switch. Whereas in the open switch, it has to block some voltage. This open switch has to block some voltage. It is in off state. So what is the polarity of the voltage that is blocked? This point A is now connected to the upper terminal. So this is plus, and this lower end is now negative. Okay. But remember that this is now an AC side. So on AC side, this at an instant this may become plus minus, and at another instant this may become minus plus. So your switch has to block both voltages. It has to block voltage of both polarity. Whereas it conducts current only in this direction. If you close the other two switches, here also, switch is conducting in this direction, and this switch has to block the load voltage. This open terminals are now connected across the load. So load is AC. So this has to block positive or negative positive. bidirectional voltage blocking capability is now required. So what is a switch which is having a bidirectional voltage capability? Till now we were using this particular arrangement. This switch was now mostly used, an IGBT with an anti-parallel diode or body diode. So this particular switch has bidirectional current capability. This can conduct current in both the directions, but this can block voltage only with collector positive and emitter negative. This has only this particular voltage blocking capability. It cannot block reverse voltage. So an immediate solution is use an SCR. We use an SCR. We need a unidirectional current conduction between a pole and throw and bidirectional voltage blocking capability. So the one solution is SCR. And SCR can conduct current only in one direction. It will conduct current only in one direction from anode to cathode. But it can block voltages of either polarity. It can operate either in forward blocking mode or in reverse blocking mode. It can block voltages of either polarity. So SCR is a natural option. But what is the disadvantage of using SCR? Nowadays, people don't use SCR that common because SCR is not a fully controllable switch. You need separate commutation circuitry to turn off the switch. You can turn on using gate control, but to turn off, we need separate commutation circuitry. So SCRs are now used mainly in high power levels. Like for HVDC applications or for high power applications, SCRs are used. But most of the other applications, IGBTs are replacing SCRs. So we can use an IGBT and a series with a diode. So an IGBT in series with a diode is a switch capable of conducting current only in one direction. This switch can conduct current only in one direction because IGBT can conduct current only from collector to emitter and diode can conduct current only from anode to cathode. So it has unidirectional current carrying capability, but it can block voltages of either polarity because when a positive voltage appears, this collector to emitter, this IGBT can block a positive voltage. When a reverse voltage appears, like this minus plus, this diode can block a negative voltage, this end minus, this end positive. So voltage of either polarity can be blocked by the combination of series combination of IGBT and diode. So we can replace the switch by an IGBT and a diode series combination. So here the current flow is in the opposite direction. That is why it is shown in the reverse fashion. Okay, so now I have replaced all the four switches by this series combination of IGBT and diode. So current flowing through the load can be when this particular two IGBTs are conducting, current flowing through the load will be in this direction, that is say plus IDC. When the other two switches are conducting, it may flow in the reverse direction. So in that case it will be minus IDC, the opposite direction. So plus IDC or minus IDC or zero. See how zero is possible. If you turn on switches like this, if you turn on these two switches, there will be freewheeling of this current source in this path. Or if you turn on these two switches, there will be freewheeling here. So in that case, you will have zero current from this switch flowing through the load. So you can have either plus IDC, minus IDC or zero flowing through the load using this arrangement. And unidirectional current is flowing through this DC. And now let us redraw this figure. Let us interchange the positions of these two. This is just redrawn in a different fashion, in a textbook manner. So if you redraw it slightly, you will get this figure. So if you redraw the previous figure with a different orientation, if you show the source outside and show the source in load inside, if you show the load inside this converter and the source outside, you will get this figure that you can verify. So this will be the final circuit diagram of a current source inverter. So in a current source inverter, you have series combination of IGBT and diode. And by adding one more leg, you can have three-phase CSI, three-phase current source inverter. And between this RY, we can connect one load and its filter capacitor. Between Y and B, we can connect the other phase of the load and the filter capacitor. Then between R and B, we can connect the third phase of the load and its filter capacitor. So like that we can have a three-phase current source inverter also. So three-phase current source inverters are also popularly used for grid integration of renewables and for driving induction motor drives or motor drives. The main difference from ESI is the voltage source inverter is actually a buck type. VSI is actually buck type because if you have a DC link voltage, say VDC, your output voltage will be lesser than VDC. Whereas in a CSI, you have a boost capability. In CSI, if you measure the output voltage of the CSI, it will be usually greater than the input DC voltage. The voltage coming across that input current source. So that has wide applications in grid integration because if you have a PV panel with a low voltage, if this voltage is low, then and if you have a grid which has higher voltage, then since CSI has a boost capability, CSI is preferable to interface with the PV and the grid. Because this voltage, low voltage can be boosted. Okay, that is one application of CSI. Then coming to multi-level inverters. So multi-level inverters are the state-of-the-art technology in now in high power and medium power applications and medium voltage also. Because in very high voltage levels, these devices are only upcoming. So usually it is preferred in medium voltage applications. So these are the three popular multi-level converters. Cascaded experts, which is usually used in medium voltage to high voltage. When you in power electronics, medium voltage refers to 2.3 kV to 33 kV. So that is medium voltage. Something greater than 33 kV is referred as high voltage, and less than 2.3 kV is low voltage. So medium voltage and high voltage ranges, we have cascaded experts. And then in the medium voltage ranges, we have neutral point clamped converters. Then the upcoming topology is modular multi-level converters, which are used in high voltage or extra high voltage, higher than large values, maybe in HVDC. So very large power also they can handle. In HVDC applications, power ranges to megawatts range. So we will discuss cascaded expert and modular multi-level converter. So multi-level, what is the use of multi-level converters? So because multi-level converters can produce more sinusoidal voltages, highly sinusoidal voltages, and and they are using large number of low voltage reliable switches. So what is the advantage of using low voltage switches? Because whenever a new switch is developed, usually when it enters the market, it usually comes in the low voltage range. Then later, from using research and development, high voltage devices will come up. So we have a lot of expertise and experience with using low voltage devices. So people prefer to use many low voltage switches in combination since it is more their operation is more understood and the gate drive circuit for the low voltage devices are already well designed. So that is another attraction for using multi-level converters. So low voltage devices are more mature because we have more understanding about, for example, a 650 volt IGBT. 650 volt IGBT is more popularly used rather than a 6500 volt IGBT that is recently developed because the people are not much familiar with this high voltage device, whereas they are more familiar with the low voltage power device. So there is a tendency to use many low voltage devices in cascade connection. So we'll start with a half bridge circuit. So in a half bridge circuit, I have already mentioned the output voltage between VA and VAO can take two values. It can either be plus VDC or it can be zero. So we have only two level output. So VDC or zero. So if you draw half bridge converter in this fashion using a single pole double throw switch, when the pole is connected to the upper throw, you have VDC by 2 between your A terminal and the neutral. VDC by 2 and between A and when it is connected to lower throw, you have minus VDC by 2, plus VDC by 2 and minus VDC by 2. If we draw VAN, it will be switching between plus VDC by 2 and minus VDC by 2. So we have only two levels. So there are a lot of harmonics. We have already seen the Fourier series expansion. All the odd harmonics are present. So it is not close to sinusoidal waveform. So if we can access this neutral point, we will get three levels in the output. Because when you are connecting the pole to the upper throw, you will get VDC by 2. When you are connecting the pole to the lower throw, you will get minus VDC by 2. And when you are connecting the pole to this middle throw, you will get 0. So one more level is now introduced. So what is the advantage of introducing one more level? So that I will explain. Suppose we have a two-level VSL. So in a two-level converter, we have only plus VDC by 2 and minus VDC by 2. And if this is our fundamental, then the instantaneous error is more. Because instead of using a square wave, in practical application, we will be using a PWM wave. So instead of using a square wave, we will be using something like this. We will switch between plus VDC by 2 and minus VDC by 2. So the issue here is, if you look at this figure, the instantaneous error, and if you observe this particular point here, the instantaneous error is the difference between this plus VDC by 2 and this sine wave. Whereas at this point, if you are at this point, the instantaneous error is very huge. Now the sine wave is here, and the minus, this is this output of the converter is minus VDC by 2. So the difference between the actual voltage and the fundamental is large. Instantaneous error is more. So whenever you are having large instantaneous error in a power electronic converter, harmonics will be more. That is one disadvantage. And another disadvantage is this is switching from rapidly from plus VDC by 2 directly to minus VDC by 2. So the dV by dt is very huge. So that is detrimental to the switches. So we will try to reduce the instantaneous error, and at the same time we will try to reduce the dV by dt. So that can be achieved by using one more level. If you have one more level, say 0 in your converter, what is the advantage? If you have 0 level available, instead of switching directly to VDC from VDC by 2 to plus minus VDC by 2, you can switch to 0. So this is also possible. So in that case, if you realize the positive half cycle using this part, then the instantaneous error is now less. Instantaneous error between the sine wave and the actual output voltage is less, and the dV by dt is also less. We are jumping from VDC by 2 to 0. Previously, we were jumping from VDC by 2 to minus VDC by 2. So the harmonics will be reduced, and at the same time dV by dt will be reduced. That is the main attraction of going for higher levels in the converter. So if you can introduce many points like this, you will get a staircase like waveform, and this will be more close to your sine wave if you have large number of levels. So that is the principle of multi-level converters. So in a cascaded H-bridge converter, the basic building block will be an H-bridge. So an H-bridge we have already seen, it has 4 switches and a DC link, and this is referred to as a cell in the terminology. And we have several such cells connected in cascade. So this DC source in the cell can be either a capacitor, a charged capacitor, or it can be the output from a rectifier. We have a utility, we will rectify it into DC, and that can be used maybe in motor drive application. Or if you have a renewable integration, you have a PV panel, output of the PV panel will be the DC voltage feeding to this half bridge. So here I have shown a 2-cell half bridge. So here two cells are connected. A cascaded H bridge with the 2 cells. So what will be the output voltage of this? So this VH1 is the output voltage of the first cell, and that can take three values. It can take three levels: plus VDC, minus VDC, zero. This we have already seen. Similarly, VH2 can also take three levels: VDC, minus VDC, zero. So overall, if you consider this, it can take five levels: plus 2 VDC, plus VDC, 0, minus VDC, minus 2 VDC. So now the levels has increased. So five levels will be there in the output voltage waveform. So the instantaneous error will be less. Uh, dV by dt will be less. So with two cells, we got five levels in the output. So with n cells, you will get 2n plus 1 levels. So this is one example. Suppose output voltage of VH1 is this. It has only two levels. Sorry, three levels: plus VDC, 0, minus VDC. It has three levels. Here also VH2 has three levels: plus VDC, 0, minus VDC. And VH3 has three levels: plus VDC, 0, and minus VDC. But they are operated with a different control circuits, so that this pulse width is different. Now, if you add up all these three, you will get this five-level waveform. You have plus 2 VDC, plus 3 VDC, sorry, plus 3 VDC, plus 2 VDC, plus VDC, 0, minus VDC, minus 2 VDC, minus 3 VDC, like that. So you can increase the number of levels. So higher voltages can be realized with switches operating in plus VDC. Okay. Since in each half bridge, the switch is seeing only VDC. The switch sitting in a half bridge, full bridge is seeing only VDC. So lower level voltage rating switches can be used, but your final output is high. It is going to 3 VDC or maybe 7 VDC. Large values can be realized. Now this can be extended to three-phase. If you introduce two more legs like this, so this is cell 1 in A phase, cell 2 in A phase, here cell 1 in B phase. Like this, if you introduce more legs, you can have a three-phase conversion. One end is connected to form the neutral point of the three-phase system. The other three terminals you can connect to three-phase load, or you can grid in the grid connect. Now coming to modular multi-level converters, this is more popular nowadays. But actually it was proposed in 2001. But at that time, the control circuits were not that developed. Controllers were not developed to control these many large number of switches at a time. So, but now it is gaining importance. So there large number of submodules will be there, and these submodules will be either half bridge or full bridge in a modular multi-level converter. So this is the typical topology of a modular multi-level converter. It appears similar to a half bridge, except it has two arm inductances. And in each arm, it has an arm inductance and large number of submodules, n submodules. And each submodule will be either a half bridge or a full bridge. I have shown a half bridge here. Full bridge just now we have seen. So it has two arms. In each leg, it has two arms. So this complete thing is called a leg. In each leg, you have two arms. And in one arm, there is an arm inductance and a large number of submodules. And one submodule can be either a half bridge or a full bridge. And by controlling this, this control of this modular multi-level converter is slightly complex. By controlling this, you can get DC to AC conversion or AC to DC conversion. It is actually bidirectional. By introducing two more legs, you can have three-phase connection, and this can be connected to the grid. Okay. So this is the circuit topology of modular multi-level converter. I am not going deep into this. So one more point I want to emphasize here. If you observe that if IA is the current going out of this pole, then IA by 2 will be coming from upper arm, IA by 2 will be coming from the lower arm. And at the same time, if you, there will be a DC current which is flowing here. There will be some DC current which is flowing through both the arms. So that DC current is known as circulating current. So circulating current minimization is an active research area in this modular multi-level converter topology. How to minimize circulating currents. And whenever active power flows through one arm, what will happen here? Because we are saying that this half bridge is a like this. There's a capacitance in this half bridge. So there is a chance that this capacitance will get discharged. So the voltages in all the capacitors in different submodules may not be the same. So how to equalize the voltages in different submodules in capacitors? That is also an active research area. Then this is a typical large-scale PV power plant with a conventional power electronic topology without using modular multi-level converter. Here, if you observe, you have a PV array on the input side. Then PV array will give you DC output. Then you have DC to DC conversion. Then DC to DC output converter will give you a DC output. So this forms the DC link. Then DC link, there will be some filter capacitor to stabilize the DC voltage, and that DC voltage is fed to a PV inverter, and there will be a filter. And if this voltage is less compared to the grid voltage, there will be a transformer. So the medium voltage transformer, this will be bulky, and this makes the system. And this forms a disadvantage for the system, a bulky transformer. So in order to avoid this, modular multi-level converter and the multi-level topologies can be used. So this is a typical cascaded H-bridge-based grid-connected PV system. So here, if you observe, you can see H-bridges here. One full bridge is here, one other full bridge is here, another full bridge. And these full bridges are connected in cascade. So they form a CHB. And for a CHB, you need DC supply. So that DC link is here. And this DC is coming from this bridge rectifier. So this bridge rectifier is giving the DC output, and the input of the bridge rectifier is coming from an inverter. There is a high frequency link here. So this transformer will be operating in high frequency because this is switching at high frequency. So the size of this transformer will be really less. Then this PV array will be feeding DC supply to the inverter. Inverter will be switching at high frequency. High frequency AC is produced, and that is rectified. And that rectified DC output voltage is fed to cascaded H-bridge. And that forms only one phase of the system. Similarly, there will be B and C phases, which are not shown here on the backside. So that forms a cascaded H-bridge based grid connected system. So large number of switches are there. That is one disadvantage. But and main advantage is these switches are low power, low voltage switches. And another advantage is this cascaded H-bridge converter, and specifically this modular multi-level converters have fault tolerant capability, fault tolerant operation. So what is fault tolerant capability? Even if one switch or one module in a modular multi-level converter fails, still the converter can operate with a reduced capability. Whereas if we are using a conventional voltage source inverter or a current source inverter, if one switch fails, we have to completely shut down the system. Whereas in a modular multi-level converter, this is another attractive feature. We have a fault tolerant capability. So here I have shown a modular multi-level converter. This is, as we have seen in the previous diagram, this is the arm inductance. So this forms one arm. In one arm, you have one inductance. This is another arm inductance. And in each arm, you have large number of submodules. Here only 2 submodules are shown. So in the lower arm also 2 submodules are shown. So these submodules are getting power from the DC link. So DC link is getting DC output voltage using a flyback converter. So what is a flyback converter? We have seen in the beginning. So flyback converter provides a galvanic isolation also between the PV panel and the DC link. So now coming to AC to DC conversion, now I will quickly go through this. So this we usually study in our undergraduate syllabus. We give more emphasis to AC to DC conversion using thyristors. So this is uncontrolled rectifiers means we use diodes, diode bridge rectifier or diode center diode rectifier like that. In controlled rectifiers we use SCRs. Whereas the problem with the uncontrolled rectifier or controlled rectifier is that whenever you have a a rectifier which is connected to an AC system. So suppose we have a rectifier and a DC load, and we have an AC system here. Then the current seen by the AC system. So the current drawn from the AC system should be in phase with the voltage on the AC system. Then only you have UPF, unity power factor operation, on the AC side. But unfortunately, for uncontrolled rectifiers, for bridge rectifiers and as well as controlled rectifiers using thyristors, the input side power factor is poor in normal condition. So PWM rectifiers. So PWM rectifiers are used to overcome this disadvantage. So it is decided that the rectifier present a resistive load to the AC power system, that is unity power factor load to the AC power system. So rectifier, if you model the rectifier as an equivalent circuit, that equivalent must be a resistance RE. It should present an equivalent resistance to the AC system so that the current is flowing in UPF. If we use a simple bridge rectifier, that is not the case. If you plot the IAC waveform, you can see that power factor will be low. So what we can do is we can introduce a DC to DC converter stage between the load and the rectifier. So this is our rectifier section. This is our AC side. This is our load side. Between the rectifier and the load, we can introduce a DC to DC converter, and by properly controlling the duty ratio of the DC to DC converter, we can make the input current flowing in UPF. We can control the power factor. So there are a lot of circuits for power factor improvement, and this particular topology is limited to 3 kilowatt. This particular arrangement is, since it is a single phase supply, we have a 240 volt supply, maximum around 15 ampere we can draw. So it is limited to around 3 kilowatt. For higher power levels, we cannot use this idea. So in higher power levels, we use 3-phase PWM rectifiers. In 3-phase PWM rectifier, the circuit diagram is same as a voltage source inverter, but here the power flow is opposite, in opposite direction. Here it is from AC to DC side. So this circuit we have already seen, but here instead of DC link, you have a DC load, and here you have AC source. So the power is flowing from AC to DC, and by properly switching the switches, we can control this AC side current to be at UP. So there are several control mechanisms. So this is we can sense the output voltage, and we can compare it with the reference voltage, and the output is fed to a controller. This is a typical control system. So the controller will generate a maximum current value, and using the voltage template, if we measure the grid voltage, using that we can create sine templates, sine omega t minus 120, sine omega t plus 120. That sine templates will be created here, and that will be multiplied with this maximum current. So we will get the current value, and that current will be compared with the actual current flow here, and that is that error is fed to a controller, and that will generate PWM. So this is a typical circuitry control circuit to get UPF on the AC side. So that is an ideal rectifier. Now AC to AC conversion is can be easily achieved using by combining two bridges. So here you have AC to DC conversion using a VSI, then DC to AC conversion using a voltage source inverter. So in between you have a DC link. So by the back-to-back connection of an AC to DC converter and a DC to AC converter, you can get AC to AC conversion, and there is an energy storage link in between. That is one topology, and same thing can be achieved using current source inverter. This circuit we have already seen. Current source. In current source inverter, we have IGBT in series with the level. So there are a lot of AC to AC converters. We don't have time to go through. So this is a very good reference paper. Review of 3-phase PWM AC to AC converter topologies. Even though it is an old paper written in 2011, it gives an exhaustive list of all the different topologies so far. Then you can go through all these references to understand different AC to AC converter topologies. So it is written by Kolar and P.W. Wheeler, review of three-phase PWM AC to AC converter topologies. Then one more upcoming converter is dual active bridge DC to DC converter. So you have a voltage in AC voltage source. Suppose we have an AC voltage source and another AC voltage source, and they are interfaced using an inductance. And this is a very famous equation. We study this in power system. It is V1 V2 by X into sine delta. So if there is a phase angle difference between the two sources, active power will flow. If delta is positive, active power will flow from V1 to V2. If delta is negative, active power will flow from V2 to V1. So this I can introduce a transformer in between to get galvanic isolation. So here V1 angle theta 1 is one AC voltage source, V2 angle theta 2 is another AC voltage source. In between you have inductance and a transformer of turns ratio 1:1. And how to realize an AC voltage source from DC supply, that we have already seen, DC to AC conversion. So here you have DC link, full bridge. So full bridge gives you an AC output. So this is your inductance transformer combination. Then from that output, AC to DC conversion, again using a full bridge. So this particular arrangement is known as DAP, for dual active bridge, and there are a lot of applications for dual active bridge using in wireless power transfer and electric vehicle charging. Then to conclude, let us come to hard switching. So in hard switching, we will have switching losses. When a device turns on, voltage will come to its from on blocking voltage to its on state voltage drop, a lower value, and the current will be initially zero when the device is off, and it will go to larger value when it turns on. So there will be some overlapping portion, and during that portion, you have power loss. Similarly, during turn off, your current falls from large value to small value, and voltage increases from small value to blocking voltage, on state voltage drop to blocking voltage. In between, there is an overlapping period and power loss. So switching loss is there, and in order to avoid that switching loss, people have introduced resonant converters. And in resonant converters, we have this is the typical topology. 1 second, let me plug in the charger. So in resonant converters, you have a DC to AC conversion on the input side. There's an inverter and a resonant tank, a resonant circuit in between, and finally an AC to DC rectifier and a load. So this is a typical arrangement. All these circuits we have already seen. DC to AC conversion. This can be done using this arrangement, half bridge. Then you have a filter part consisting of an L and C. Then this is our rectifier part, rectifier with the center tapped transformer. Then this is our load section. So this is matching with this block diagram. Now what this filter will do? So this rectifier I have modeled using an equivalent resistance. So now this to this pole A, this filter capacitance, filter inductance, and the equivalent resistance of the rectifier is connected. So when the upper switch is on, current will be flowing through the upper switch, and it will be flowing through the filter, and it is flowing to the equivalent load. So if you properly select the filter inductance and capacitance, even though the voltage waveform is a square waveform, it is switching between VDC and minus VDC. This current waveform will be smooth, sinusoidal. And if the switching frequency is close to the resonant frequency of this circuit, this filter circuit, this will be in resonance, and the current will be almost in phase with the voltage. In resonance, you have resistive behavior of the circuit, so current will be in phase with the voltage. And the moment we will switch off M1, and we will first switch off, and then we will switch on the other switch. Okay, we will break before make. We will turn off M1 and after a while we will turn on M2. So suppose we turned off M1. M1 is now open. So what happens? Some current was initially flowing in the circuit this way, in this path. Some current was initially flowing, so we cannot break that current. So the moment you open switch M1, current will continue to flow through this diode and this path. Okay, so this diode will be turned on, forced to turn on. And what is the advantage of that? When this diode is forced to turn on, the on-state voltage drop across the diode is around 0.6 volt or close to 0. And immediately we will turn on M2. So now M2 is turned on. But what is the advantage? Now M2 is turned on with a 0 voltage across it or 0.6 volt across it. So at the moment when M2 is turned on, it sees only a 0 voltage or 0.6 volt, very small voltage across it. So it gets 0 voltage switch ZVS turn on. 0 voltage switching turn on. So power loss will be less. So there are a lot of topologies to achieve this type of resonant operation that you can go through. So to conclude, we have seen several converters starting from DC to DC conversion, then DC to, from that we reduced DC to AC converters, then AC to DC, then AC to AC conversion. And I will stop by giving some references. So these are some video lectures. So high power modular multi-level converters, analysis, design and issues. This is an NPTEL lecture by Professor Anandaroop Das of IIT Delhi. So this is a very good lecture series, and we will get an in-depth understanding the working of NMC to go through all these lectures. And if you are interested in the control and tuning of power electronic converters, this is a very good lecture series by Professor Shantanu Kapar of IIT Kharagpur, control and tuning methods in switch mode power converters. This is also an NPTEL lecture series. Then PWM for power electronic converters by Professor Narayan, and fundamentals of power electronics by Dr. Vivek Agarwal and L. These 4 lecture series are available in NPTEL, and these are very good references for power electronics. In one series may contain around 50 to 60 lectures, but even then, if you spend time to watch all these lectures, you'll get thorough understanding of basic power electronic converters. Okay, so with this I will stop. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, Arun sir. Any questions? Rajat Kumar has raised his hand, so any questions from any participants? Okay, so thank you very much, Arun sir. So please fill the feedback form which is shared in the chat box. And so tomorrow we have 3 sessions. The first session will be a general motivational session. So please join for that session at 9 o'clock in the morning. So please try to be more interactive. So the next session it is which will be a more interactive session. So please try to join for that particular session. Okay. So thank you very much. Thank you all for joining. So we'll meet tomorrow at 9 a.m. So the session link will be the same. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.